8:28 reminds us that we know that God works all things together for the good of those who love Him and for those who are also called according to His purpose. You're watching Expensive Lessons. Don't go away. Welcome back. You're watching Expensive Lessons with me, Wavinya. My guest today is Wakonyo. Welcome to the show. Or should I call you Waki?
Waki, please call me Waki.
Yeah.
Please. Yes.
Welcome to Expensive Lessons. It's so good to have you.
Thank you for having me.
So today you are here to share with us lessons. I usually like to ask my guests, these lessons that you're here to share with us, what did they cost you?
Wow, I think off the top of my head, what they cost me was my health, both of my mind and my physical body.
Wow. Yeah. Today we're hearing about lessons that cost my guest her health, her mind, her physical well-being. Don't go away. Welcome back. You're watching Expensive Lessons with me, Wavinya. My guest today is Wakonyo.
Yeah.
Most of us call you Waki, so we'll stick with Waki for this show.
Please, let's do
In
that.
fact, Waki was shortened from just Wakonyo.
It's actually short of Wakonyo.
Yeah. You know, I've never actually had anyone sit and tell us about lessons that cost them their health and well-being. Maybe we can start from the beginning and even maybe a little background about Waki.
Okay, a little background about Waki. I was always that child who didn't have things going for them. I'll tell you why. I was overweight and had bad eyesight and crooked teeth. So my esteem was always on from when I was a child. But as I grew up, I was able to work through those things and to settle into a career that worked for me.
You know, sorry, I
you want to go back to my childhood?
No, I'm like, you know, the person that's sitting in front of me is not overweight, does not have crooked teeth. You know, sometimes I feel like this show, we need to have like pictures that when someone is talking, like, you know, we can see the before and after. But wow, that was you.
That was me. That was me. And so what it did, I didn't realize until much later that it really affected my esteem.
Okay.
And so if I worked hard in school, it's because I wanted to compensate for what wasn't working. So I'd work hard in my classes, in my lessons, and I ended up as a lawyer, and I thought, I've been able to do this thing because if this side isn't working, let me find something that's working. And so for very many years, my adrenaline was to compensate for what I didn't have, and that led me to compensate with titles upon titles upon titles. And girl, I picked up the titles. I have, you know, there are times when people introduce me and I'm thinking, who is that person? They start with advocate, governance auditor, mediator, coach, and those are all me. But it got to a point in my life and I kept asking, I have all these titles, but how come I have such an emptiness? And that emptiness hit me when I got to 120 kgs, not pounds, kgs. And my health was struggling because my knees couldn't support my body. And I would walk into doctors' offices and tell them, my knees are aching, can you give me some pills?
So wait, so 120 kgs, you're not a very tall person.
I'm very short. Yeah.
That was quite some weight. So was that because of what you diet or because of, you know, some of us are sweet, and we like sweets. So
it's important. You know, I always say when you look at an overweight person, be very careful not to judge them because you don't know what took them there. Now, people will resort to different things as comfort. And that's how people end up on drugs, alcoholics.
Yeah.
My comfort zone was food. And every time I felt stressed, Doritos, crisps, you know those super loaf buns, the packet.
Yeah.
You're supposed to eat like 2. I could eat the packet, you know, and I'm not like very proud of it, but that was my comfort zone. And so my resort to dealing with my emotional issues was to eat. So by the time I got to, and like you said, I'm short, I have actually got very thin bones. So doctors would tell me, we need you to lose weight. That's the last time I would see that doctor. Why are you telling me about my weight? I'm telling you my knees are hurting. Leave my weight. By the time I got to a certain age, at the age of 47, I knew something was very, very wrong. And so one doctor said, you have arthritis that is irreversible in your knees.
You know, we hear arthritis for people who are like in their 80s.
By the way, the doctor told me, you have an illness for a much older person. That's the last time I saw that doctor, you know. I was just that person. Until I got to the third doctor who told me the same story. And for me, that was a wake-up call. And by the time I acknowledged that I was struggling, and let me explain, let's put this in perspective, so that people don't imagine that I was walking around feeling boishe. I was really doing well in the corporate world, getting promoted, doing everything I needed to do, giving talks, but nobody knew that when I finished and I got off that stage, got out of that presentation, I went back into a default eating, distressed, sadness. At the same time, I was raising 2 children and my marriage was falling apart.
Wow.
So there's a part of me that was just not working. But if you saw me on the outside, in fact, you would never ever imagine that anything was wrong.
Yeah.
So yes, the doctors then did tell me that your arthritis has gone to a point where we can't operate in Kenya. So in 2017, I found myself lying in a hospital bed in Hyderabad, India. And it was a wake-up call. Let me backtrack to a year before I got to India.
Yeah.
You know how you get in touch with your doctors in India? And one of the doctors gets back to me and says, we can't operate immediately until you lose weight. I was like, here's another doctor again, telling me the same story. But that was such a wake-up call in the sense that even the doctors are not going to operate. And I walked into...
So, you know what, Waki?
Yes.
I really need to be at the... So you go to doctor 1, they've told you lose some weight, you're like, I'm not going back.
Yeah.
Doctor 2, doctor... What was going on within you? Why were you resisting the prescription?
Because I needed to fix it with a pill. I didn't want people to know. Because if I'm going to go for an operation, that means people are going to know that she's in hospital. It was important for me, for people to see me as okay.
So the image was keeping you away from even your own healing.
Exactly.
in that
the
way.
Image, the titles, and how society expected me to show up. But how society expected me to show up, I wasn't showing up for myself, and I didn't realize that for a while.
Yeah. So now Kenya can't operate you. India is saying even you us we can't until you do this.
Yes.
Okay.
So I walked into a health club, and I looked at the instructor. He looked like a person who can kill me with exercises. But I said, anyway, let me just talk to him. And I went and I looked at him and I said, so, you know, I had a face where if I spoke to you, it sounded so good. So I went with the same narrative. So I need to lose this amount of weight within this amount of time. He looked at me and he asked me one question. He said, are you ready? Do you know? The tears just started flowing. And he just sat up and said, you're ready. And I began a journey for 8 months with a nutritionist, changed the way I ate, changed the way I think about food, about myself. When I walked into Dr. Prabhat Lucky Reddy's office in India, he looked at me and he said, what happened to you? I said, you happened, because I had lost quite a bit of weight by that time.
Wow.
Yeah.
So I'm still at... You finally walk into a gym to lose weight because of solving arthritis. Because that's really why you are going. You know, you want, your knees were aching.
Yeah.
You were not. So what else was I guess I'm not trying to ask symptoms, but what else was restricting your movement in terms of or well-being because of that weight?
I tell you, everything. You know how I remember one very significant incident that was such a wake-up for me. And, you know, I tell it to a lot of, especially groups of women, when I'm talking to women, and they find it so hilarious. It wasn't hilarious at the time, it's hilarious now.
Yeah.
Because I was so out of control of my physical body, when I went into meetings, And sometimes I'd go into really high-powered meetings. I would first observe the chairs, because I will not sit in a sofa. Because if I sit into a sofa and sink into it, it's going to be a battle to get me out of that seat.
To get up.
Exactly, to get up on my own. So I'd look for steady chairs, firm chairs, and I had this thing of, oh, I have a bad back, so I need to sit on a chair which has a firm back. It wasn't the chair, the back. It was, don't you put me in a chair where I'm going to sink in, you know? And so I realized my life was so restricted. Or if I was going for a meeting with a group of people and I knew there were stairs to climb, I would go earlier so that I climbed the stairs slowly by myself, so that we're not huffing and puffing together and you're wondering, what's going on with this one? So my life, I could tell the quality of my life was, it was incredible. I got home, went upstairs, didn't come back downstairs, because coming up and down the stairs was an uphill task.
Yeah.
I knew something was wrong, but I didn't want to address what was wrong, because my mind was struggling as well. So I thought, my physical body, this is neither here nor there. It will have to just align itself.
So those 8 months after the tears, what did he put you through, this gym man?
What I love is that I went through a process of understanding food and my relationship with food. The nutritionist asked me, what is your relationship with food? I said, does anyone have a relationship with food? You eat it. He said, no. And that's when it hit me that I was comfort eating. It also was a journey to understand how I think, how I feel the way that I feel, and also to be gentle on myself, that it was going to have to be a journey.
Yeah.
And I was ready for the journey. You have to be ready up here before you're ready in the gym. You don't even need to be in a gym. Even if you walk every single day a certain amount of, a distance, you will lose the weight, but it has to start in your mind. Are you ready to do the work? And what does that work look like for you?
Yeah. So now you are in India. You have traveled to India. The doctor has seen you and is like happy.
He was happy, yes.
Yes. We're in India. We need to take a short break. Don't go away. Welcome back. You're watching Expensive Lessons with me, Wavinya. My guest today is Wakonyo Waki. Before we went on the break, you were sharing with us your health journey, 120 kg. Doctors, and that now develops a condition of somebody who is probably in their 70s and you're only in your 40s.
Yeah.
And the doctors in Kenya are saying they can't treat it. And even your consultant now in India is saying they can't treat it. You have to lose that weight that you have been delaying, and you finally go to a gym, lose some weight. So how much did you lose before now you went to India? Do you remember?
Before I went to India, I'd actually lost about 8 to 10 kgs.
8 to 10 kgs.
Which was a start, because it was a trajectory.
Yeah.
And I needed to do it slowly without doing a fat diet.
Yeah.
Was
But that's
starving
a lot.
myself. It is a lot, but I tell you, it was commitment at a different level.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that sounds like almost a kilo a month. I mean, before you went,
Absolutely,
like,
absolutely.
wow.
Yeah.
So now you're in India. Tell me about that whole process. So, did they do the operation or okay?
So I get to India and I go through the tests and everything.
Yeah.
And the day of the operation comes in and Dr. Prabhat says this operation will probably take about maybe 4 hours. And so they give me the epidural, the one where you're awake, but they've numbed from your waist down. When they began the operation, of course I can't see what they're doing,
Yeah.
but I could hear. I thought they were building a house. It was chiseling. And I thought, I called the doctor. I said, by the way, I don't need to hear this. He said, you don't want to be with us? I don't want to be with you during the operation. And I fell asleep. I got up. It took it took almost double the time they expected. And later on, he came and sat with me and he said, when we opened up, we were amazed that you were actually walking even with crutches, because we had nothing to work with, as in I had destroyed my knee completely. And so the amount of metal they put in my body, in fact, to date, at airports, malls, When I walk through, I have to explain. I can't go
It goes
through here.
doo-doo-doo, like
I can't go through it, you know. In fact, my kids joke and say you're like a high performance car with tectonic plates, because even when I saw the x-ray, I was like, all this metal is in my body, and they put in the metal in my body, and it's not there that I can remove in the night, you know, put it on the side. It's there for life. And I remember having a very spiritual experience in India and thinking, Lord, the rest of my life, I'm going to have to live with this metal. And I remember one time God putting in my spirit that it's going to be a reminder of my grace. And I remember one doctor saying that you will probably have a limp for the rest of your life. You probably won't have mobility for the rest of your life. And I was like, I refuse that statement.
Yes.
And I came back, and one of the things I was determined to do was to be able to have a physical body that is fit. The scripture that says that my body is a temple. I'm like, Lord, you want me to work in this body. Give me that body that I can work with. And do you know that at the age of 55, I started hiking? Wow. And when I tell people the hikes I've done, they're like, with all that metal in your body? And I said, God, you're a God. Everything works together for good. So there are times I'll even go hiking and tell my fellow hikers the story of the metal in my body. And they're like, it's good you told us after a hike. Because the whole time would be thinking, what if the metal flies out of her person? But every pain point you have, every experience is a story. And I'm glad that I get to tell this story.
Wow. So at this point, I want you to give lesson number one, because I'm thinking lesson number one is you delayed or kept, postponing the reducing the weight and whatever. So it cost you your knees.
Exactly.
You know, so delay sometimes might not be denial for whatever, but this delay is very costly. So I don't know how to phrase it in a lesson. How would you phrase it in a lesson?
Your body is always speaking to you.
Okay. So Wakonyo, before you go too far, in the hiking and all, I'm thinking, it's still in India, you know, all that metal. What was the lesson there for you?
The lesson is that when God created our human bodies, He didn't create them with spare parts. So when we destroy what He created, then we have to have man-made spare parts, which are not the ideal. Why aren't they the ideal? I'll always be reminded at airports. I'll always be reminded when I go to a mall and have to pass through that and explain and show a card that I can't go through that. I'll always be reminded, because that wasn't God's original intention.
Yeah.
But then the expensive lesson also for me was that I needed to have been listening to my body early enough. If I had listened to my body, when I started feeling the pain in my knees, number one, I'd have stopped wearing the heels. Remember, I think you remember I used to wear heels 24/7.
Yes, of
because
course. The lawyer,
smartness cannot allow me to wear flat shoes. That's what I thought then. But if I had listened to my body, I'd have stopped wearing the heels at that point and taken care of my knees, and maybe I would have gotten to a point where I didn't need to have the metal placed. But because I didn't take care of it, I now have to have the metal.
Wow. Wow. So you come back to Kenya. I know you've talked about hiking, but you're still 110 kg. Plus now the metals, I'm thinking. But the lady that's sitting in front of me looks like you're 60 kg, if I'm not wrong, you know. Tell me, before you fast track to now, this person that's hiking and doing all those things, there was a journey in a process.
Yeah.
Share with me a little bit about that.
I'm always careful to note that the journey was holistic. It wasn't just about losing my body weight. My body weight was a symptom, but there was a lot going on in my mind, because my marriage wasn't working. Eventually it ended up in a divorce. So I was emotionally distraught, and I felt like the world was judging me for what I couldn't have done or what I didn't hold on to. So I remember thinking that the journey had to begin in my mind. It had to be holistic.
Yeah.
And a lot of people ask me why on social media I'm Waki space. I had to find Waki again. Waki was lost in the weight, lost in the sadness, lost in what wasn't working, and lost in the titles. And I remember thinking, if all these things are taken away, who is the person that's left? And that's the person I needed to find. And that meant healing in my mind, the way I thought. And the amazing thing is, as I started healing in my mind, a lot of things began to fall into place. A friend of mine said to me, I want you to go and see a Christian clinical psychologist. And I said, God forbid, I'm not mad.
I know. Why is our generation like that? I mean, Gen Zs talk about mental health like
Exactly.
this.
For us,
But our generation...
woe to you if you said you were going to see a therapist.
Yeah.
The next stage is Madare. That's what we thought. And Madare also is there to help Kenyans and to help people. And the first day I went in to see this, the counselor, I walked in there and the first thing I thought, this counselor looks younger than me. Why am I coming to give this person my problems, you know? And I remember telling him that, you know what, you do what they taught you how to do in school. And I looked like, since I've paid, might as well. He asked me 3 questions and I ended up bawling in tears. And I realized that my mind was there was so much going on that even if I tried to lose weight, even if I tried to eat right, then things I needed to deal with. And I am the first person to always tell people, when you need help, get it. I love to tell the younger generation, when you feel you need help, get it, seek it. Help is not a dirty word, it's a great word, you know? And so I began to understand that I had lost myself, and I began to see, who is this person? What does God say about me? Who is this person, despite being the advocate, the auditor, the coach, the mediator? Who is this person? And what do I want the world to find? And what do I want them to say about me when I'm gone? What do I want them to say? Yeah.
Wow. You know what I love about what you've just shared is giving yourself, I mean, help is not a dirty word.
Yeah.
Because like I said, our generation, you know, we were told, keep things inside.
Yeah.
Don't talk about your home outside, you know. And I guess maybe because, you know, the framework of, you know, the way the family system, maybe when our parents were growing up, there were more people that you could go to and talk to. But I love that you went to seek a therapist, because go look for help. And it helped you, right?
Absolutely. And my therapist became one of my greatest friends. And thereafter, I'm the one who tells everybody, I need you to go and see someone. Then one day I remember asking the therapist and saying, do you think there's something wrong with me that I can refer so many people to you? Is it that I hang around people? Are we all crazy, the people I hang around? And he said something very important. He said, we all have a level of quote-unquote craziness. Are we ready to deal with it? That therein is the difference.
Yeah. Wow. We need to take another short break, pay our bills. When we return, we'll hear more about this story. Don't go away.
Join John Carson every weekday as he takes us on a journey through the Bible.
Whoever shall seek to save his life, if you go back to living for yourself, you're going to lose it. But whoever shall lose his life, give up his life for my sake, he shall preserve it.
Enjoy interesting, knowledge-packed, yet simple teachings through his humor and in-depth understanding of God's Word.
The last people that tried to put God in a box, literally, he rose again. He wouldn't stay in their compartment. If God was small enough for me to figure out, he wouldn't be big enough for me to worship.
Tune in to Hope TV for John Carson every 10 p.m., 4 a.m., and 10 a.m. weekdays on Hope TV, where you look and live.
Going back to the heart of worship.
Whether up the mountain or down the valley, we were created to worship God.
Enjoy carefully selected worship music every Wednesday all day long.
Oh, I will sing of the goodness of God. Miracles
We take it a notch higher with more worship music.
Every Wednesday
Is Worship Wednesday.
only on Hope FM. Listen and leave.
Welcome back. You're watching Expensive Lessons. My guest today is Wakonyo Waki. Before we went on the break, you had finished sharing with us lesson number 1, which is we need to listen to our bodies. You know, we don't have spare parts, and that was, even for me, a good lesson to hear. And then now you had begun your healing journey, and you said your healing journey was not just dealing with the physical weight. You realized your healing journey was holistic, and so going to see a therapist and understanding therapists are not just for people who are mentally ill, but for all of us. You know, like I said, Gen Zs talk about have at least normalized mental health for us. Which I think is a good thing. But so now you've dealt with, you know, at least are on the journey with your mental health. What other things did you pursue, you know, in the healing journey?
Let me say this. My healing journey began when I got to the end of myself.
Okay.
It's so important for me to articulate that I was in a space I never imagined I would ever be in my entire life. The lowest that I've ever been. A person who, you know, I look back and think, who was that person? I was sad. I was lonely. My children were now young adults. I felt like they didn't need me that much. I was scared. And I remember one time the therapist asking, what are you most afraid of? And the thing that I blurted out of my mouth without even thinking, which means obviously it was in my spirit, was, I'm so scared of dying alone. And I had a picture in my house, you know, in my mind, of my children have grown up and I'm all alone. And I realized that at the end of myself, I wasn't truly living. And then I had to ask myself, what does truly living look like to Waki in this season?
Yeah.
One of the things I feel that I lost was time, in terms of, I felt like, you know, I was so engulfed in being sad, in feeling insecure, that I lost a lot of time. But as I began to heal, I began to realize that life is for the living. It doesn't matter how difficult our lives are, there's a brighter day.
Yeah.
And we have to focus on that brighter day. But guess what? Getting to that brighter day is intentional. It's not hoping that there's going to be, we hope in God, but it's not like I'll get up tomorrow and I'll just look around and think, okay, perhaps it's a brighter day. No, it's about getting up and embracing the day, even when it's difficult. And I started to ask myself, what do you want to do? And I realized, because I had lost myself and I was learning myself, I began to tell people about finding themselves. The reason why a lot of people call me now a personal brand expert is because I take people through their personal brand. I didn't start taking people through their personal brand because I read it in a textbook, but because I had lost myself and found my brand. Here's the thing.
So it's from personal experience.
Mine is a life experience. Yeah. There's no book that could have taught me about brand Waki. And recognizing that when God created me, he wasn't confused and he wasn't taken by surprise. It wasn't like, here's Waki, what is she going to do? I was created for a season, for a reason. And my season and reason has a time span attached to it, which means that gap between the years of life and death. And I needed to embrace it and live it to the full. So when I take people through personal branding, I want you to understand the best you can be. People think the best they can be is to own a big house, a big car, which are all nice things. But being the best you can be, and one of my favorite orator talks about it, is living your best life in the environment that you're in with the resources you have available.
Wow, I love that. Say it again.
Living your best life. And this is Dr. Darius Daniels. He talks about your best authentic life is living your best life in the environment that you are in with the resources you have available. So for every season, I can say I am living my best life. I retired from the corporate world after 34 years this February. And I feel like I'm living my best life because I get up and I do what I want to do. I train, I consult, because the resources I have available are me, and people call us retirees, but myself and a friend of mine, we changed the spelling of the name. So it's not retirees the way you know. It is RE-TYRES, because the tires on the destiny of my life have just changed. I haven't stopped working.
I like that.
And so what does living my best authentic life look like now? So if I'm talking to a person who is in their 20s and I'm helping you to understand your brand, I'm not asking you what do you want to do when you're 50. What do you have available now? And what you have available now, how are you going to use it so that at the end of the day, you say, I use the currency of my time in the 24 hours the best way I know how.
Wow.
And it's a journey.
Wow. I mean, I'm listening to your, because the expense, the things that it's cost you to sit here and now share with us the lessons. First your health, some, important lessons there. Time. For me, this Waki that's sitting in front of me, I like this version. Wow, I really like this version. You still have to take me back to the 110. I'm still back at a little bit at health. 110 to the weight that you're in now, because a lot of the things that you're talking about now seem to be the intentionality of the process. You took ownership of your life and made certain decisions about it that have produced this person that is sitting in front of me. So I need you to take me step by step, because the people watching and I'm also listening to a few of those steps, because it feels like a lot of them were mental, like decisions that you needed to make, and resolutions.
I like that you've asked that, because changing my life meant changing the way I do a lot of things. Of course, changing the way I eat, my nutrition and my dieting.
Yes.
But also understanding that health and fitness is not a good idea. It's a matter of national concern, lack of a better word. It is a necessity. It's not a good idea, it's God's idea.
It's not optional.
It is not an option open to us. I tell people, do you wake up in the morning and think, should I brush my teeth? Perhaps I should. I think so. No. You actually get up and brush your teeth because you know that it is good for your teeth health. How much more your overall body health? Get out, go for a walk, go for a run if you can run. But what works for you? But physical fitness is not an option to anyone. Eating properly is not an option. Do you know in Africa how blessed we are, because we have so much natural food? I mean, you walk around and you'll find natural food. What is it that works for you? What is working for you? But it's intentional and it's every single day. So when I realized that my health was a lifestyle, it wasn't that I'm going on a diet to get to the 67 kilos I am now. It was going to be a lifestyle, and I called it a lifestyle by design. And that design was going to change in my seasons. If somebody in their 20s can run 20 miles. If I try and run 20 miles, after 5 miles, you might collect me from the ground. But what works for me I'm turning 60 in 2 years. What works for an older woman in terms of my health? I speak to a lot of young women. I tell them, go for all the medical checks you need to go for. Take care of your health. Wear your heels to the office, but take them off when you're walking long distance. Take care of your nutrition. Take care of your body. I mean, you're beautiful. Why aren't you taking care of your hair, of your nails? Take care of you. I'm telling guys, take care of the way you look. Just be intentional about, and you're not doing it for anyone else. You're doing it for yourself.
For your temple.
Exactly. I will get up and be going to the supermarket, and I'll dress up to go to the supermarket, and you'll meet me and say, are you going somewhere after this? No. It's for me, because you know what? There's a thing that happens when you take care of yourself. You feel good about yourself and it resonates. And people will treat you well because you have taken care of yourself well. So it actually resonates and it's good for you. And that's what God intended. He intended us to live whole lives and enjoy and celebrate those lives.
Yeah. So taking ownership of your health. So
Exactly.
doing what it takes to be healthy.
Exactly.
To take care of this physical body, the temple that God gave us.
Yeah.
Taking care of your mental health.
Yeah.
I'm still at that mental health that it is not a nasty word to see
Not a
a
dirty
shrink
word to ask for help,
it's
for
for
help.
us for help, you know, and every area spiritually as well, I guess, you know. In fact, for me, I'm wondering, connecting back to God, because you talked about sadness.
Yeah.
So how did, you know, how are you able to reconnect with Him?
The important thing about community is that you must be placed in the right community. At my worst, I began to isolate myself. You know, when you're ashamed of yourself, ashamed of what you're doing, ashamed of how you're feeling, ashamed of what you need to do, you can isolate yourself. But I had a few friends who would seek me out, as in come and collect me from my house and say, I've come, I'm sitting here, you know?
Yeah.
You know, Carol Mwindi knows herself. She would come to my house and say, I've come and I'm sitting here. And then you must have a community of faith. I will never forget how my pastor, Oscar, looked for me. And he said, I would like to see you, I'd like to see you. He looked for me twice. And because I'm isolating myself, I kept saying, oh, it's a busy season. And I can get away with it because I'm a busy professional. It's a busy season, so, you know, I'll let you know. The third time Pastor Oscar looked for me, he sent a message and said, you will come to my house at this date, at this time. And I was like, whoa. It was a weekday. He didn't ask whether I had meetings or anything. And then I got there. His wife was waiting for me on the steps. And I said to her, wow, the message I got from Pastor. And she said, actually, that's what you can tell it was like a summons.
Yeah.
Because when you're attached to a community, they will know when things aren't happening. And even when you try to isolate yourself, they'll lift you out. This is the thing. We need to have people who will lift us out of that mess. Sometimes we can't lift ourselves out of it.
Yeah.
And that conversation I had with my pastor that day was significant for the years to come. Significant I was able to say I am sad. I was able to say I am struggling. I was able to say I can't pray. I was able to say I know there is God, but I don't feel Him. And you know, to be able to be honest enough to hear myself say it, that's the process of healing. So the power of community, but your community needs to be the right one. Evaluate who the community and what the community around you looks like.
Yeah.
Will they come when you're in the doldrums? Yeah.
Wow, important lessons there. I can see you holding some books. And I, you know, before the show started, you had mentioned some things that were birthed out of this whole experience.
Yes.
And, you know, this would be a good time to tell us, beyond the lessons, new babies were born.
Exactly.
Yeah.
What used to happen is, for a long time, I couldn't sleep at night. So I'd get up like at 2 a.m. and I'm staring and thinking this is going to be a self-destruct until morning. And one night I got up at that 2 a.m. and something my spirit said, just pick up your iPad and start writing. And like, what am I writing? And honestly, I started to write. This book was birthed. I believe it was birthed in the middle of the night.
Wow.
And the book is called Pieces of Whole. This is 6 women telling stories of very difficult and challenging situations. I am only one of these women. The other 5 women I have never lived. But in that night, during the night, I was just typing away and writing about people who were going through difficult situations, and they were brought together by one woman called Tumaini, which is hope in Kiswahili.
Yeah.
And I hadn't planned for it to be a book. I was just typing. And then one day I gave it to somebody and the person said, have you considered publishing this as a book? I'm like, no, I was just right. He said, no, publish it. And that's how this first book was birthed.
Wow.
Then the second book was A Fallen Ring. And I went, of course, I mentioned I went through a divorce, and at the end of it all, I knew there was a lot of healing that I needed to do. And A Fallen Ring is a Christian woman's account of true healing.
Yeah.
And true healing means forgiving yourself, forgiving everyone around you, acknowledging the role you played. We always focus on other people, the other person. No. What is the role Waki played to get to this place? And even forgiving myself for that, because I'm not a perfect human being by any standard. And a fallen ring was written to indicate that the ring may have fallen, but God picked me up. So it's about healing. It's really about healing. So the writing was birthed out of this.
Wow. Are these your first books?
These are the first books I've ever published. And, in my 50s,
So this experience has made you has added another title, author.
When I'm introduced as published author, I'm like, who is that person?
Wow.
And
where can people find these books?
So we are waiting to launch the books,
Yes.
but I have a number which I can have on the screen.
Yeah.
And now what we do is people call that number and we deliver them to where they are.
Yeah.
And it has been amazing how many books have been sold in a short period of time when I'm not trying. I'm like, I'll wait to launch and then begin. But God is just a God of wonders.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Something else was born. You mentioned it during the interview, Waki Space.
Yes. So on social media, I go as Waki Space. And I was never really like, my generation. And one day my daughter said, Mom, every time my friends come and you speak with them, they leave encouraged. You always have nuggets of wisdom. And she said, why don't you put them on social media? I'm like, I'm not a social media person. And we even have a joke that when my daughter put me on Instagram, for instance, I remember I was on Instagram for a while, then I didn't do anything. Then she said, Mom, you've not done anything. So we started doing it. And I'll just come on for less than a minute a day and just shoot a clip, what's in my spirit.
Yeah.
And then one day my daughter looks and says, Mom, you have that time it was I think 2 years ago, you have over 6,000 followers. I said, who are those following me and why are they following me? I didn't even understand. And I think I followed probably about 100 people. And then she says, why aren't you answering the things in your DMs? I'm like, what are DMs? And I went and I realized that people had been writing and asking questions. And I'm like, oh my gosh, suddenly I felt like I had a responsibility bigger than I expected. And I realized that Waki Space was me identifying what the space God has given me to fill and letting myself speak from the overflow. And from the overflow, so every evening I go into my DMs and every evening somebody has written, they're feeling at the end of themselves, they're looking for this, and now I have a hotline number which I can give them to call for counseling, and that is free. And do you know, I kid you not, it's so fulfilling that I'm not at the pulpit, but sometimes I feel like I have a ministry in the marketplace.
You do.
I'll be in a mall and somebody would say, Waki Space, you don't know me, but I DM'd you, you connected me, and now I'm healed. Nothing can compare to that feeling. Even giving me a promotion in the bank when I was still in the bank, nothing is as beautiful as understanding your space to fill right now is as to motivate and encourage. Because I do personal branding, I encourage people and I even teach people how to have a personal brand statement. What is mine? I am a kite flyer. I fly kites. And those kites are every single person I interact with and have the opportunity to help grow into the best authentic version of themselves. Wow. That's the call on my life.
Yeah.
That's the biggest call. If you put me in a corporate setting, if you put me in a training room, if you put me on a cruise, if you put me in a supermarket, my call is to understand which kite am I supposed to fly. And then when you get it and you understand your space, everything else falls into alignment. That's Waki Space.
I love Waki Space. I love the sound of it. I have interacted with your Instagram myself and have, been inspired. Just maybe in summary, how many years from, this lady that went to India and the lady that's sitting before me, how long has that process been? How many years is that?
India was 2017.
Okay.
And after 2017, all the way into 2021, I honestly feel like I was still looking around like, what happened? Still trying to understand. But something happened in 2022.
Okay.
something shifted. And now, when I look back in retrospect, God was allowing me to heal. And you know, there's a place of healing where God removes you and heals you in private.
He does.
He's such
He
a great
does.
God
He does.
that he allows you to cry in private.
He does.
And cry around people who won't judge you when God says it's time for you now to start.
I always say God is so gentle. He's so gentle.
Isn't he amazing?
He is.
Because
he really is.
You know, I love watching people in movies having that beautiful cry where they dab their eyes. When I cry, it's the ugly cry of everything.
Makamasi cry.
Of you're cleaning your face and it's down to your toes. But God allowed that season, and I realized now he was removing me so that I can heal. Because if I had come out at that point, a person will break other people. In 2022, I'll tell you what happened in 2022. By 2022, I had hit rock bottom already. I knew that I could be at self-destruct in a second. By 2022, I recognized that all the titles I had picked up meant nothing if my emotional, my mental health, and my physical health weren't working. By 2022, God reminded me of the call on my life. And something shifted in the sense that it meant that, you know what, when I come out there, nothing shocks me. A lot of young people walk up to me and tell me, I have a story to tell you, and I know by the time I finish telling you, you'll be so shocked. And they tell me the story, I'm like, okay, so how are you feeling about it? I remember a young man saying, you're not shocked? And I looked at him and said, I have hit the ground so hard.
Yeah.
I'm actually unshockable. And sometimes God allows you, now I understand, God allowed me to go through what would have been shame of hitting the ground. Even my own children seeing me at my worst. And you know, the amazing thing is your family members see you at your worst. The weekend, I couldn't get out of the house. I just couldn't even get out of bed. My children saw that. For my son, who turns 30 next year, to one day sit and say, Mom, you're the strongest woman I know. Nothing else. It's come from a place of you seeing me at my worst. When I understand why and the trajectory, it was hitting the ground hard enough to be able to rise. And what does rising look like? Giving of yourself. Never judging another person's journey. I believe that a person who has not hit the ground may not have the full competence of lifting somebody else off the ground. God doesn't waste your pain. He uses it. And that's why there were days in the worst of my pain, I would say, Lord, it is time. Let it be the rapture. I'm done. God's like, no. All this was for a reason. All this is because I need you to the person you are now. I'll just quickly tell you, when I was still working, one day an intern walked into my office, and this intern knew me as the person I was, the healed person I was, and she says, you know, when I grow up, I want to be like you. In my head, I'm like, girl, you do not want to be like me. Child, be careful. And I remember asking, the wisdom of not now killing her joy. And I said, what about me would you like to be? And she said this, she said, you're upbeat, you're encouraged, you're motivated. And I said, do you have a few moments? She said, yes. Can I let you in on a little bit of the journey? And I let her in on what I knew she was ready to hear. Until today, she sends me messages and says, that conversation was the biggest thing, because now I understand when I go through challenge, it's so that I can be that person I want to be like. Let's have the conversations of hitting the ground and get up. Let's not just have conversations of how I made it.
Exactly.
Let's have conversations of why God allowed me to make it. Let's have conversations of the journey. That's where we leave a legacy, even when we're still alive.
That is so true, because sometimes we envy people's lives, but we don't know where they've walked through. And if we actually were allowed to walk through that, we probably would not be able to carry half the things they have carried to produce the person that they are. Waki, thank you so much for coming to share your story. I think the scripture I started with, which is, and we know that God works all things together for good for those who love him. I think that's you personified,
So some of the expensive lessons I continue to learn on my journey are: one, take care of your physical body. this body does not have spare parts. You don't want to have metal in your body to compensate for bad choices. Your body is constantly talking to you and telling you what it needs. Don't ignore the voice that is your body. And go for the tests that you need to go for. Go for your health checks. It doesn't matter what health check it is, even if it's scary, go and have it done. Your knowledge has a responsibility towards your healing. Don't ignore it. Secondly, take care of your emotional and your mental health. If you need help, help isn't a dirty word. Seek out your therapist. Seek out a therapist whose values are the same as yours, so that they're in alignment with what you believe, your beliefs and your values, but seek out health. Take care of your mind. Take care of your peace. What does peace look like to you in every season of your life? Be intentional about it. And thirdly, if you need to, start over. Being certified as a coach, a mediator, a governance auditor, all these things happened after the age of 50. It's okay to start over. Identify what your space looks like and embrace it with everything you have, even if it means going back to school. Identify what you are on this earth to do. I found out Waki's space. What does your space look like? Thank you.
Watching expensive lessons, and I want to encourage you who have been watching and following this show. If you are out there and you have an expensive lesson to share with us, please reach out to us on the numbers below the screen. Would love to hear your story, and even maybe share it on the set. So this set is not just for exclusive for some people, it's also for you. If you have a story, please share it with us on that WhatsApp number and we will get in touch with you. You've been watching Expensive Lessons with me, Wavinya. My guest has been Waki. Have a great week. God bless you.